السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. For the ones who don't know me, my name is Akram. I'm a psychologist by trade. I've been working in the community for many years now, mainly dealing with with children, families, try to understand some of the struggles that our children, our families are currently going through. So when I was invited to give this talk, I struggled a bit, to find a subject that may interest everyone, but also benefit. Why? Because there's so many subjects that are beneficial, but there are certain subjects that are currently a bit of a challenge for us as a community. But first of all, I would like to thank Brother Vinil, Imam Ikram, and the sisters at the back for the amazing work they do for Academy Alive. It's incredible. The amount of work that is done at the back is just phenomenal, and I'd like to thank them for it, and may Allah reward them for it. So the topic today is raising men. So how did I come to that topic? It was very simple. I was trying to find a subject, as I said, that will interest a lot of people. And then what I did is I just went online and went on YouTube. And what I started to find is a bit of a trend. I started to look at different issues that are being faced by young men and families. And what I found that nowadays there is a massive issue in regards to how to express masculinity, how to express virility, how to express oneself as a male. So what I did is pretty much I went on to the dictionary and I tried to find the definition of a man and what did the word man mean. And what I found is nothing. I just found that actually a man was a human. A man could be a woman or could be a male or a female, sorry. And there was nothing there, to guide me in regards to finding what the man was. So the best way to find it was to add an adjective to it. So I went on and I added responsible man. And suddenly, I found a lot more meaning, to the word man. A man by itself, without responsibility, without authority, without a role, is just a human, male or female. So it's really hard for us to know the place that we can give to that man. So again, all men are males, but not all males are men. So when we look at it, it is important for us to understand that throughout history, there was something, in regards to, there was some kind of, process to reach manhood, process to reach a state where you'll be recognized and respected for being a man. In certain cultures, you have to go through different rituals in order to prove that you're a man. But what do we say in Islam in regards to a male becoming a man? So I dug a bit in history, and I went all the way back to our dear Imam Ghazali, and he said something beautiful. He was one of the first ones to recognize that a child was purely egocentric, which means that he was always centered towards himself. A child was unable to recognize others and other needs, until a certain age. So it was very difficult to responsibilize a child, for its actions. So what we find is we find that it is very important for us to understand that, in an age where social media are becoming one of the main providers of education, for our children, it is important for us to also understand that we also have a role to play when it comes to educating our children, and especially when it comes to, teaching them how to be men. So how does that work? It's very simple. Most of us wait for our children to reach puberty in order to start doing something. So we understand that, okay, now you understand that you have to pray. Now you're going through puberty and you understand that you've got a role and responsibility. But at times, it's too late. Why? Because most of the education of a child happens in the first 5 years. So past that first 5 years, you've missed an opportunity to give your child the tools, the lessons, the understanding, for them to understand who they are as males, but also who they are as Muslims. So we've got to understand that by the age of 3 years old, a child knows that he's a male or a female. Okay? So you have to also understand by, 2 years old, the role of a father becomes very important. Why? Because in the first few years, few months of a child's life, the mother is the one who just does most of the work. Why? Because she's the one creating that sense of safety, that safe space for that child to grow as, I will say that she also gives that sense of trust. And that's why it is important for us to understand this. In an age where both parents have to work, not because we want to work, because we have to work, it is important for us to understand that we miss out on the best years of our children. And then what happens is we end up struggling down a track when they become young adults or teenagers. So one of the biggest problems we have nowadays with our children or with our young people is discipline. So we see it at school. I've worked in schools for many years, and I've seen the change. And I couldn't understand where the change was coming from. How all of a sudden our kids were becoming naughty. How all of a sudden respect was going out of the window. So I went back and tried to understand, what was going on. And what I found out is actually because of the pressures of society, we are pushed to prioritize certain things, such as putting food on the table, paying rent, and doing other things. Therefore, our children become somehow secondary. And what happens with that? They end up missing out on us. So I was born and raised in France. From the age of 2.5, 3 years old, they send you to school. Okay? And they send you to what we call the maternal school. So you're very young, 2.5, 3 years old. You don't understand much, but you're already in a school, already in a system that neutralizes your understanding, where also the teacher becomes the main provider, of education. The father doesn't have the same say as the teacher anymore. Why? Because when the child goes back home, they say, my teacher said. And when the child tries to, discuss that with its own child, they say, no, but you don't know. My teacher knows better. Okay. So we understand that we're losing our place as parents, not because, we are unable or incapable of being parents, but because we are unaware of the things happening around us. Today, the main source of influence are people like, Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson. I love the work that Jordan Peterson does. Nothing wrong with that. But his attitude towards religion, especially his attitude towards Islam, is questionable. Okay? So do we want our kids to learn from someone who denies Islam? Do we want our kids to learn from someone who just somehow simplifies things to a point where it's just a one-sided argument? So we've got to understand that, there are certain influences, and it's been like this throughout history. When we look at it, and if we look at history, the history of the Ottoman Empire, people struggled to break through. They wanted to just destroy the Ottoman Empire, but they couldn't do it from outside. Why? Because they had the best army. Why? Because they were disciplined from outdoor. So what they did is actually they touched into two different things: materialism and nationalism. And that was the best way to break through an empire who ruled for many, many years. So we've got to understand this. We are under attack whether we like it or not. Our kids are under attack whether we like it or not. And we've got to protect them. So how do we protect them from the influence of social media? We've got to understand that our kids, on average, and that's not me saying this, it's just actually, there is a survey that showed that on average, our kids spend 14 and a half hours a week on social media. That's a lot. Okay? 14 and a half hours a week. And that's just, during school time or whatever it is. Think about school holidays when they've got all that time to spend at home. What do? Oh, sorry, I don't have time. I have to work. So the problem we have today is we've got to understand that our kids lack the guidance. So they go out there and find it on social media or through friends. And what we do there is actually we lose an opportunity to teach our kids. And we allow other people to have an influence on our children. So we've got to understand that what leads to identity crisis down the track, as Erickson says, it is important for us to understand that what leads to that crisis is the fact that the person doesn't know itself. So I want to go back to what Sayyidina Ali radhiyallahu anhu used to say. The strongest man amongst you is the one who knows himself. Do we know ourselves? Do we know our kids? Do we know their needs? Do we understand their needs? So we go and rush into providing for their wants because somehow we feel guilty for not being there, for not spending the time with them. But they don't need the stuff. They need the time. They need the skills. They need the tools. And okay, it's fine. We've got to work. But we've got to understand that what made Islam so powerful was a sense of community. Being able to rely on one another. So we're not only responsible for the things we do, we're also responsible for the things we don't do. We can all say that, I'm busy with my family, I'm busy with my kids. I've got no time for other kids. But we've got dozens of children who have no father, who have no role model. What do we do with that? And then, once they reach an age when they start rebelling against authority, Islam, we say, no, they're bad kids. They're not bad kids. They're not bad kids. They need guidance and they need love. We've got to understand this. Pre-Islam, children were just a source of labor. At that time, you had chances, or great chances, that your child may die before puberty. So people had many children, in order to cover for this. And as a result, they never felt attached to their kids. So when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came in and started to show love and mercy towards children, people realized that, whoa, wait a minute. Do you show love to your child? Yes, I do. Because the one who shows mercy will be shown mercy by the most merciful. We've got to understand that education starts early. The importance of adab, the importance of manners in our deen is central to our belief. We can't believe. We're not believers unless we show manners and good manners. So now I've been watching the World Cup. I don't know, many of you probably have been, and I've seen amazing scenes. Japanese supporters going around the grounds and cleaning after everyone has left. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Why don't we do this? It's our land. We somehow, we are one of the founders of cleanliness as, in a way, a pillar to faith. or pillar of faith. So the thing is, when we look at it, it is important for us to understand this. When Japanese supporters go and clean the ground, everyone applauds them and everyone praises them. But when you've got Muslim Qatari supporters giving food and tea to their guests, no one talks about it. So there is a bit of a bias there when it comes to, obviously, young Muslims. And we've got to understand this, and we've got to be okay with it. There's no point in just trying to be, angry about it. No, we've got to know who we are first. And we've got to know what we stand for. Conformism or trying to please other people is not part of our deen. We're not meant to be sheep and follow others. We're meant to actually somehow lead the way. Allah sent the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a mercy to humanity. His teachings spread all over the world and reached every corner of the world. Every single civilization has benefited somehow from the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We've got to teach our kids history. We've got to teach them who they are. We've got to teach them manners. If you look at Japan, to go back to Japan, the first years of the education is dedicated only and solely to manners, teaching them manners, teaching them how to behave, teaching them how to be good citizens. So we've got to understand this. Manners is half our faith. If we forget about the manners, then we become animals. So I'll go back to what Imam Ghazali used to say in regards to knowing the self and knowing the attributes of our soul. Our soul is, in a way, composed of different attributes. And some of those attributes are the rational, the predatory, and the bestial. The rational allows you to reason and make the difference between truth and falsehood. We need to be able to rationalize things. Otherwise, there is one way to stupidity, and the other way, the other extreme, is to be able to use other people's and abuse other people. So we've got to be careful with that, because a balance within rational leads to wisdom. And we've got to understand that wisdom is, unfortunately nowadays, a rare commodity. We tend to go for what we call the predatory self. I read a quote that says, strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. It is true. But what do we call a strong man? Is it someone that's just going to fight and hurt others? Is it someone who's going to fulfill responsibilities? What is a strong man? Because according to some of those speakers, that we follow on TikTok or on YouTube, a strong man is someone that has to be a beast. He has to show strength. He has to show aggressivity. I have to be feral. I have to show that I'm a man. Okay, that's great, fantastic. But there are times for it. You don't go home and say, I'm the man. You guys follow me because I'm the man. I'm the strong one here. I'm the one who feeds you. Is it strength? Or is it abuse? You've got to be careful with the advice you receive online when it comes to just being a strong man. Yeah, okay. We understand that the youth has that energy. That's why Allah loves youth. Because, subhanAllah, youth has the courage to do certain things that as older adults we don't have. Why? Because we've got too much to lose. Why? Because now we realize we've got a family, we've got kids, we've got mortgages, we've got this, we've got that, whatever it is. And no, I don't want to lose that. But kids or young adults are strong. They're courageous. But there is a balance with that too. Because too much of that aggressivity leads to recklessness. And you know what happens with recklessness? If you've got a person who's reckless, then I can tell you one thing, you're in trouble. Because that person won't have that element of fear or restraint. And we've got to be careful of that. Because again, when you look at it, courage is important. Anger is important. Islam never said that a man shouldn't show anger. No. Sayyidina Ali says, he says something beautiful. He says, the strongest man is not the one who can fight, but is the one who can control his temper. So there is an element of restraint. You can hurt, but you prefer not to. Why? Because you're applying wisdom. So we've got to understand that the other element is bestiality. And it's more related to impulses, desires, like food and other things as well. Too much of something is never good. So we've got to apply restraint in everything we do. So the key message there is to understand that we've got to use our intellect, because our intellect is what separates us from animals. Our intellect allows us to reflect and reason. It also allows us to make the difference between what is truth and what is false. So it allows us to find one element that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mastered: justice. Justice is something that's very hard to get. And that's why our kids struggle sometimes. Why? Because they may think or feel that we're not fair, just. Why? Because we show too much anger and not enough restraint. Because we lose it before trying to understand. So Islam was never intolerant, like, some people want to portray. Islam was always concerned by understanding other cultures, understanding people and their circumstances. So Islam is one of the most tolerant religions in the world. Allah says in the Quran, "La ikraha fi din." If we were intolerant, I don't think, we would be this way. So we've got to understand this, that we have a deen that is complete. But the problem is the fact that our kids are not introduced to it in the nicest manners. Allah loves whatever is beautiful. The problem is the fact that our deen is beautiful, but the way we portray it, the lack of role models in our communities doesn't allow our kids to benefit from it. So in the first few years of a child's development, we've got to understand it's an introduction to everything. In the first 7 years, we introduce them to parents and, to the fact that, again, they've got kids. But we've got to understand, in the last few words, and I will finish by this, we've got to understand that it is important for us to look at the bigger picture when it comes to raising a man. Raising a man is not necessarily, applying force and strength. Raising a man is also something beautiful. Why? Because it's an amana, it's a trust that Allah has given us. And we've got to look after that trust. Those kids don't belong to us, and one day they will leave. But we've got to give them the tools and the understanding in order for them not to survive, but to thrive in this dunya, and to allow them to reach a safe place in Akhirah, inshallah. Jazakum Allah khair for your time. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.